being here. I think we can all agree that the TV industry, as well as the entertainment industry as a whole, has gone through some massive shifts in recent years. And I think who better to hear from about the current state of TV, both as an artistic medium and as a business, than from some of the people who are creating these shows. So without further ado, please welcome David Hudgins, Janine Sherman Barrois, Konrad K, Mickey Down, and Graham Yost. Thank you all for being here. I wanted to start by, as I said in my intro, the state of TV, I think TV has just gone through some massive shifts recently, and I'd love to hear, kind of in your own words, how you describe the state of TV right now from a showrunner's perspective.
I'll start. I have to say, we feel quite insulated from it because we've had a show in production basically for the best part of forever. And we have 2 years in between seasons sometimes. So we're just in this constant cycle of in and out of production. And I feel like when you step out of it for a second and you realize actually how much people are struggling at writers to get stuff away, development's happening. There's obviously been a huge amount of lag since the strikes. And it feels a little bit, hopefully it feels like it's roaring back or about to roll back. But at the moment it feels a little bit stayed and a little bit uncertain.
Yeah, I would add to that. I mean, I came up on shows where it was 24 episodes, 26 episodes on like Third Watch and ER, Criminal Minds, stuff like that. Writers don't have those big orders, not all of them. Some of the FBI shows, some of the big Dick Wolf shows, they still have those big orders. So with a shorter order, writers are not all getting the same experience of producing their own episodes, of going to set, because for the show that I'm here for now, we did 6 episodes. It took us, we had 2 mini rooms. We had 1 room and then a 7-month delay for the other room to finish it up. And that's just a different cycle. So it's like there's less jobs, and that's harder for creatives.
I will say I've been in network television for a long time, so perhaps I have a different perspective than other people. I think the state of TV is good from the standpoint of I work on a Dick Wolf procedural and they go for years. So
yeah, of course it's good.
I will say the 1-2 punch, I believe, was the pandemic followed by the strike. I think it really threw people on the back of their feet, but I hope that we're coming back from that. We had a 13-episode order last year because of the strike, and now we're back for 22, which is great until I think about starting the room Monday, and we got to come up with 22 episodes. But yeah, so that's my perspective.
Graham, did you want to add?
Yeah, there is a sense of if you're working, it's fine. It's great. What's the problem? Yeah. And then going back to England, which is where we produce Silo, and just talking to the drivers, and it's like, oh, there's no one hiring. It's just kind of died from the strike. And there was a huge construction project to build a whole new set of studios north of London, northeast, and it's just been shuttered. They're not going forward with it right now. So it's not good in that regard. I think there's a feeling when, Landgraf said how many years ago, peak TV, and we've got too many shows, that there was going to be this contraction. And I think we've seen the beginning of that. And it has many ramifications. It's not just fewer shows, but it's like, what kind of shows? With that term, with the gourmet cheeseburger line, I honestly forget which outfit that was with, but there is that thing. There was so much freedom 5 years ago, 6 years ago, whatever. And it feels like that is shrinking a little bit, but it's all right from where I'm sitting.
Janine, you mentioned that, writers are going to set less, getting less of that experience. And that's something that I've heard a lot. And I wonder, first I want to ask, as showrunners yourselves, how did you learn to be a showrunner? What was your first experience like in that regard?
I mean, ours was very atypical, I think. What you were just talking about in terms of PTV, like the chances of our show getting made in the current climate, I would say are 0%. I think we got very lucky. We hit a kind of perfect storm of stuff where people were willing to take risks with young creators, where people were desperate for stuff. And HBO was at a time where I think maybe they thought, oh, we have to compete a little bit with the streamers. We need more content. Like, we want to make Monday night a thing. We can give, young creatives a spot. It's strange. Like, we were not, because there's no writers' room system in the UK. We didn't, like, me and Mickey, when we were doing the first season of the show, we had no idea what even producing a TV show entailed. Like, so we had no, like, the first room we ran was, we speak very candidly about it, was like a total disaster. And like, I mean, I don't know whether that actually bears out in what when you watch the first season. I think it does, but people
It's a great season.
Yeah, people keep saying that. But it's really funny. And then on the second season, we had this amazing co-showrunner called Jamie O'Brien, who had cut her teeth in the American system, where mentorship is so important in terms of just having someone to look up to, someone who like teaches you just very small things, like how to interact with people, how to make people feel appreciated, how to actually, because people always, the kind of cliche about collaboration is just, it bears out in everything you do. And we just didn't have the language to know how to engage with these people and this stuff. And then the second, she showed us how to run a great room. I think like you can almost see it in the episodes that they're much more like episodically strong episodes of TV, season 1 and season 2, in terms of the way the story unfolds. And it's a very long-winded way of saying like, it's like I'm glad we got the chance to have the HBO took the risk on us, but I couldn't see a world where that would ever happen in this current climate.
Yeah, I was going to say I had like a traditional kind of TV upbringing, and I was able to work in John Wells's camp for 9 seasons. And so watching him as a showrunner, and watching how he ran the room, how he ran set, how he dealt with actors, that helped me then emulate how I wanted to do it when I ran my first show, which was Claws. I just emulated what he did. And then there was times where I would say, I don't want to take those notes. And then the network would be like, you got to take the notes. I'm like, John, it worked for you not to take the notes. But for me, I got to like take the notes and be on budget. But you learn by having mentors, and then by replicating, or by just doing it, and you're just thrust into it.
Same for me. I learned how to do it from Greg Berlanti and Jason Katims, the first two showrunners I worked for. Yeah. And so you emulate and you learn. One thing I did do is the Writers Guild has this thing called the Showrunners Training Program. And it's literally a 12-week course. You go every Saturday and they bring people in. I found that very helpful. John Wells did a whole day on budgets, and you're just sitting there going, holy shit, I will never understand this.
But that's the sort of thing that you just do not. The UK system is just so. I mean, it's now moving towards a more hybrid American system because of the advent of streaming and stuff. But like when we started, there was really basically 2 places where you could put stuff on. There was the 3, maybe Sky, the BBC, and Channel 4, and there were no writers' rooms. A writer would come up with something, usually write every episode themselves, and then hand it over to the producers and the director, who would take control of it. And the writer might not even see it until it comes out.
Never be on set. The writer would never be on set.
There would never be a producer.
No, it's crazy.
Wow.
Welcome
here. Welcome.
But that's why. We were kind of. It's sort of a baptism of fire, because you get into something because you enjoy writing, and then you basically realize that the job entails being an HR manager and doing budgets and doing all that stuff, and like that stuff actually, that me and Konrad really like. But I think it's not the system in the UK, or it wasn't. So like, it's quite shocking when you get into it and you realize you have to do a lot of this. You have to do a lot of stuff.
I have some involvement with Slow Horses, which is the British model. And it was incredibly frustrating to that. I mean, I won't get into it, but there was some stuff. It's like, well, yeah, okay, you do it this way and I do it that way. And I guess we got to do it your way, because I wasn't the showrunner. Mm-hmm. But it is very frustrating. For me, I didn't go up the rank. I was very lucky. I had started out in TV with Nickelodeon, and then some network, comedy stuff, and then got into features and did features for a bunch of years, and then I always had a TV agent, and she said, "Do you have anything?" And this was in 2001, and I came up with an idea called what became a show called Boomtown, and they, you know what? Thank you. I know how to get this room to, is like all, you know how to do it even more. Just mention Jason Kadam's name, and oh my God, they love him.
Texas love TV.
Well, they love TV.
They
also
Love Friday Night Lights.
Friday Night
Yeah.
Night Lights. Yeah, Friday Night Lights.
For the first 8 years of this festival, they would always have there was something to do with Friday night.
Absolutely.
Outdoor screenings, and that would be the thing. Anyway, so I came up with that idea, and I think you had Carrie Burke and Catherine Pope on a panel this morning, and I totally spaced because I would have loved to have seen that. But Catherine was at NBC, and Carrie bought the show, and I asked, I said I want to be the showrunner, and that was 2001. That term was still pretty new, even then. I mean, going back to ER and John and that, yeah. But it wasn't in the major parlance. And then they let me do it, but they made sure that there was Michelle Ashford was on staff, and people who, if I got hit by a truck or turned out to be useless, they could take over. And it turned out I loved the job. But so I was really lucky. But I learned from them. It would be Michelle saying, okay, here's the schedule. Here's when the outline for episode 3 needs to come in. Here's when the script has to come in, and budgets and stuff like that. No, I still have nothing to do with that.
A great line producer.
Well, exactly. That's their job. The line producer on Boomtown would give me a list of 10 things. Here's my top 10 list of things that would really help us get this done.
Konrad, what do you always say when they say, this actor's going to cost this much, this is going to cost this? Konrad goes, it doesn't matter, it's not our money.
Very smart. Is HBO in here?
You've kind of already mentioned this, but showrunners have their hands just in everything that's usually going on. And I wonder, when you became a showrunner, what you encountered that was unexpected, or something you realized was your responsibility that you were like, what? I had no idea that I would even have to do this.
For me, it's just a personal thing of it's almost body language, which I would never really, in terms of setting morale and stuff like that. You don't kind of realize that the way, I certainly don't, I'm a very introverted person, the way you kind of carry yourself sort of feeds other people's work ethic, optimism about something. So sometimes, I sort of wear my moods on my face quite a lot. And I realized that just even the small, there's just a little bit of Jamie O'Brien mentioned earlier, is she has such a sunny disposition, and it's very natural, but it's also it's a way of making sure that everybody's excited to come to work, and it's a way of reducing fatigue. It's a way of all, and so it was kind of for me, the main lesson of that was from season 2 to season 3, when Jamie stepped away from the show and became really about me and Mickey show running it. Was making sure that, and forcing myself to do it because it's not my natural personality, of just being really up, regardless of my state of mind, regardless of how tired I was, just trying to transmit that at all times. Because I honestly, I think it kind of it can really, on really tough production days, if you kind of come in and you're just actually, this is fantastic, then it does sort of put, and my very limited experience of it does sort of help grind, oil the gears of the machine a bit.
I don't know. It's just a relentless job. I mean, that's the thing. You think it's going to be a little job, not a big job with a few issues. It's just relentless through the whole process, through getting a show greenlit, through getting it through the writer's room, getting scripts that people like, to dealing with production, to dealing with actors, dealing with all of their personalities, not dealing with their personalities. I mean, all you start to learn who's in hair and makeup, because you can ask them, how is such and such doing today? Because they are the therapist of the set. Yeah. Or wardrobe is the therapist. They will tell you that you're going to have a problem with X, Y, and Z today. But it's just a relentless job. That's why when other showrunners, you meet them, you have a fidelity of it's crazy.
I'm sorry you've been Zooming all day, Graham. But I wasn't prepared for the relentlessness of it. It's 24/7. It's especially when you're in production, and it's just, you got to keep feeding the machine. So what I learned was delegating helps. Like, for example, as you can probably tell, costume is not my strong suit, nor is hair and makeup. So I have one of my producer writers takes care of that. So I've people develop their own little things that can help you to take stuff off your plate, and you can concentrate on what, obviously I love the writing part. I love casting, in post. And so you concentrate on that and hopefully have other people there to, to do the other things.
How hard was that to learn? I like to think that I would be good at that, and I can say for certain that I would be really bad at delegating and not then still trying to control all of it. So how do you actually delegate and then say, I feel confident that they're taking care of this for me?
I said, Wendy, I get 18 emails a day asking for approvals on looks, and can you please do this? I don't have the time, and I'm terrible at it. They'll end up wearing jeans and sneakers in every scene.
You actually have no choice but to delegate at some point, because you will you just have no choice. You have to give some stuff over.
I do everything. No, I used to joke, and it was just a half-hearted thing about the story about Matt Weiner saying they wouldn't have those kind of apples in an agency at this time, and it's like, okay, I'm not that guy. I don't know about apples. And then doing Silo, I would get 60 emails a day about, would they have this in the Silo? Would they have, and it was like, oh my God, I do have to answer this. Eventually, everyone got on board with what would be in the Silo and what wouldn't. And so I don't get those emails so much anymore. But you said the three things that I enjoy doing and feel that I'm not bad at, which is the writer's room, casting, and in post. That said, the big thing is, the luck of hiring. I mean, because you don't know exactly who's going to work out in the writer's room. You don't know exactly who in the cast is really going to deliver. And it's the ability and the hope and having the faith in the process that you will sort of adapt as you go. And you find that this performer is amazing. Let's write more for him or her. And at the same time, that writer, not great in the room, but man, what a draft. And I don't know how you feel as a showrunner, but the most important thing is when you get a good draft in, first thing is excitement, right? This is good. Excitement for them, and just relief. Because there's a part of me that's like, oh my God, I don't want to have to rewrite another script. It's like, okay, that's great. Check. Let's, go on to the next one. But I had an experience on Boomtown, and there was another show that was also at the same lot, and the showrunner was someone who had worked, I think, in the Wells camp on West Wing, and he was now running his own show, and we met. Okay, it was in the bathroom, but anyway, he said, "This is the worst job in the world," and I said, "It's a really tough job." And inside I was thinking, are you kidding me? This is the best job I've ever had. This is amazing. I don't go to set that much. And with Silo, it's 8,000 miles away. So we have to have two writers on set who can rotate with the various directors and stuff. But and frankly, I've been on set more in Silo than I did on Justified, which was only an hour's drive outside of LA. But you start doing the math and going, that's at least 3 hours that I'm not in the room.
I'd say, unfortunately, that Apple story, unfortunately, I'm definitely that guy. But I find it very, very hard to delegate, and to the extent that we basically write every episode and now we direct the show as well, because we have to choose every cufflink, we have to choose every pair of socks, every pair of shoes, to the point where it's actually quite annoying. Yeah. And we sort of when we hire, and we hire really, really good people, but we do say this show is basically, obviously it's out of mine and Konrad's mind, but it's also out of our experience. It's very authored, and specificity and authenticity is super important to us. So unfortunately, I think maybe just because of this is this show, and maybe in future things we won't be like that, but I find it very, very hard not to be involved in everything.
Season on season, and it's not to denigrate anyone's work in the earlier seasons because it's fantastic, but as the show has grown slightly in profile, we've all of our heads of production have changed season to season, and what's been quite gratifying is as much control as we've had. It's really exciting when, like in costume or something, we hire someone who's like almost taps right into what we're thinking and then provides an idea that we could have never thought of, that's kind of in the same space as what Mickey's talking about, which is like, this is exactly the tie that Eric would wear in this situation. But like, you know, it's not like, it's a long-winded way of saying like, it's not like we're curbing these people's artistic expression, but it's just like, it's very exciting to us when they kind of zone in on exactly what we want.
Graham, you mentioned, when you wanted to be the showrunner on Boomtown, it was still a bit of a new term. I wonder how the job has changed over those years, how it's adapted, if at all. Do you find it to be similar to when you started, or are there different responsibilities for a showrunner now versus then?
Well, I mean, David is still in the world of, you start the room beginning of June. At some point, you're going to go into production. And the old analogy is you start laying track and then the train starts rolling. And when do you start production? August?
July.
Mid-July. Okay, now I feel like shit. I'm like, oh, God damn it. Why are you here? Just go.
NBC asks the same thing.
So yeah, that the train starts and then you hope that you've got enough track to get to the end of the season. And that there's a certain momentum to that, which is actually kind of cool. But so I haven't been on a network show since the ill-fated Reigns with Jeff Goldblum in 2007 or so. I think so. Yeah. And anyway, because Justified came along 2008, 2009. And while but it was an order of 13. And it was the train thing. It was just shorter order. You could feel like you were going to get a break. That's one thing. And people could have a life just with that one job. It's not the same as having a full network job, but it felt okay. Now it's down to 10, which from a writing standpoint, perfect for a story. 10 episodes, tell one story, fantastic. But it's harder for the staff to, make ends meet based on that. And that's difficult. We had one writer, Sal Calleros, on Sneaky Pete, who would do a season of Sneaky Pete and go right over and do Snowfall and do 10 on Snowfall, and then come back to Sneaky Pete and go on. And then he went and did The Good Doctor. And so then he was back in the full 22 grind, and he missed the shorter orders. Anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say the longer orders, it felt like you just have to rush to get it done, write faster, be grittier to get it done. And you still did great work. The shorter orders have made more hands in it because there's more time to belabor it and more time to make more drafts or to have actors' input. So it just depends. Like both ways work. The thing that showrunners don't have to deal with the way their staff does is that what Graham was saying is you get more money if you do more episodes. If you're a showrunner, you're on a deal or something, you are protected from that.
David, I wonder if you have anything to add, from the network perspective.
I would say the biggest change since the last 4 years is Zoom, quite honestly. I mean, we were forced onto Zoom because of the pandemic. And I haven't left because I kind of love it. I mean, in the old days, you would get on the conference call, right, around the table. You'd get your notes, or you'd have your production meeting, or you'd have your tone meeting on the phone. Now we do it on Zoom, and we do all our production meetings. Everything's Zoom. We've got a Zoom link that, all the big meetings. That's sort of the positive side of it. The negative side, I mentioned earlier, I'm going to sound like a broken record if you were at the panel earlier. What I really miss is having the actors come into the room and audition. Instead of that, now we get tapes, and we review them on tape, on video, and do the casting that way. So I think that's been one of the negatives. But honestly, Zoom, the job to me is still the same as it was when I started. It's just this weird tool of Zoom exists now. But in the UK, do they come in? Do you audition?
Well, I mean, the Zoom in-person thing. Do you do the writers' room in Zoom?
We do it on Zoom, yeah.
So for season 2, we did the writers' room on Zoom, and we thought, wow, this is so efficient. This is great. We're getting so much done. And we had every writer was in almost it was in a different country, so it was really useful.
No small talk.
When we went into season 3, we thought, okay, let's do a few days in person. And the US writers came over to the UK, and just the difference, I think, in in collaboration was just immense. Like I couldn't believe how, because we had every intention of just doing the first week in person. Then we changed it and thought we have to do majority of it in person, and it was just so much better. And I think also it's quite hard for junior writers on Zoom to get a word in. And I think something like, and maybe this is our experience, but when everyone just has a million ideas at the same time, and me and Konrad are obviously very vocal, and we're sort of telekinetic in the fact that we almost finish each other's sentences. So I'll say something and I'll go, I think that, and Konrad, yeah. And I think that's very unhelpful, because in a room you could jump in, but on Zoom you're sat there in a little box going, God, when do I speak? When do I speak? When do I speak?
I think what you said about acting though, auditions on Zoom is really interesting, but the very nature of tapes is there's such an exhaustive list of them that even if you're giving them due, you're watching them at the end of the day, your brain's fried. You want to give everybody due attention, but me and Mickey talk about having like a stomach brain where you can tell pretty quickly if someone's right or wrong, like very fast. It can be like within 10 seconds of a tape. But like a good example of why it's in person can be so much more stronger is like, for example, Harry, who plays Robert. It's like a key part of the show, great actor. Like, if we'd watched his tape, we would have never cast him. But we were in the room with him, and he came in, and he was a bag of nerves, and he was so performative. And we were like, and then he would break out of this performance that he was giving, and he would just be kind of Harry. And we'd be like, we'd grab each other's knee, and we'd be like, when he's not in character, he is the character. So like, so we had to keep we almost had to like break him down. So we said, go outside, gather yourself, come in again. And he did it again. And he would be a little bit of the shell would come off. And we literally send him out again, relax a bit more, come in. And then slowly we almost like had to chip away at his, the artifice of it. And then he slowly became like natural. And like, then, we were recording all these sessions. And then by like the 9th tape, it was like, wow, this is Rob. This is the guy that we envisioned. So, and we would have never given him the time of day. We would have just dismissed it probably on a tape. So.
Yeah, I had the same thing. Like in this last project, The Big Cigar, we were doing casting, and Don Cheadle was directing the first block, and we were going from a tech scout to a tech lunch, and it's a busy restaurant, and we started like looking at tapes because we had so much tapes to get through, and we caught ourselves because it's a noisy environment, and we didn't want to be disrespectful to the work. So we at times would, go to another room, or we'd go in the van that we were tech scouting with to watch the tape quietly to give the respect and the due to the actor who did it. But that is a big change, because that intimacy when the actor walks in and you have an exchange and you can actually give notes, or the casting director gives notes, or the director, it's nothing beats that. Just nothing beats it.
Just so you know, the actors prefer being.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. We can, yeah. And you do live auditions on Zoom, like when it becomes the callback for the top people. But the problem is that when you have, I'm just going to say this as you have a part, in this case, it was like Bobby Seale. He was one of the founders of the Panthers. You've kids from around the world sending tapes. So they've made it such that you can't have 100 in-person auditions. This whole looking at tape has forced people to watch all of these tapes. And you want to, as a showrunner, as a creative, you want to watch all of them because you don't know what the sparkle is. Then you just run against time. So it is disrespectful to the work, because the work used to be like, back in the day, you're on the Warner Brothers lot, the actors came in, you had sessions, you work with them, they came back. But we're all getting to this advanced, weird part of the business.
There was one thing you were talking about, which is how season 3 was different from seasons 2 and 1, and that you found people that you basically could trust more. And part of the thing, again, from my vantage point, everything's going great, which is that the longer you're on a show, if you're lucky enough to be on a show that goes, you've got department heads who you don't have to supervise that much, and you know that they're going to come up with great costumes and hair and makeup and all that thing. I'll have a few meetings with them. And then when it comes to casting, I really rely very heavily on our casting directors who have, by this time, they know the show. And they'll say, okay, we think this is the top 5. And then it'll be down to the writer of the episode and the director of the episode, and they'll send me the top 3. And then I can give it the attention that otherwise I'm not. I might be just, I got to do this. Click for 10 seconds, I'm moving on. And that's just not fair to them. It's not fair to the show because you might not, get the person who's absolutely perfect for the part because you're just too distracted. There's all these give and takes to all of this. Zoom has been incredibly helpful, and it's also, for a writer's room, for me, it's not as good. But I don't have to leave home, and I don't live in LA. And we have one writer from Australia, and when we're in production, we have at least 2 writers on set, and they're coming in late. So the freedom to do that, and having a writer who just gave birth a month ago, and now she's rejoined the room, and just sitting there with her baby, giving her a bottle,
Which is great.
and and pitching something. So that's pretty awesome.
Graham, you said something there that I want to touch on, and you said if you're lucky enough to be on a show that goes, and I think right now it feels like there are so few shows where the renewal feels like a given nowadays. And I wonder from a showrunner perspective, what it feels like on your end and how you contend with the idea that there are just not a ton of shows where you can really feel like that is a guarantee.
In terms of a creative, Konrad and I, we always write the seasons as if that's the last season. And we put a bow and stuff. So the last episode of each season could always be the end because there's no guarantees, as you said, that we're going to come back. But also we like, we like 8 hours of just storytelling that doesn't feel like it needs to come back as well. But it's always great to, and we've always, at the end of every season, we always think, God, are we going to be able to do it again? And then there'll be a spark of an idea that will get us excited. And then thankfully HBO just keep renewing it.
We burn our best ideas as well.
Yeah.
So we won't, often early in the season. So we'll just be like, oh, this is so good. Why we should do this as a mid-season finale or get someone to watch episode 5. But we're just actually, let's just put it in the first hour because we'll come up with something. We'll trust ourselves to come up with something. One of my favorite shows is The Bureau, this French spy drama. Amazing. And I remember listening to the showrunner say in this great French accent, burn your best idea. And I just thought that was a great phrase. So we kind of abide by it.
I love that. Of the many hats you wear, Mickey, I think it was you who mentioned, the idea of giving junior writers the ability to speak, and one of your many hats is mentor. And I just wondered if you could speak to that a bit and, bringing up these junior writers in your room and making sure that they are that next generation of showrunners eventually. And what your styles are. How did you learn what your mentorship style was going to be?
We have a lot of different levels of experience in our room. We have this season 3. I think the majority of the room had never written TV before, which was new, and they're mostly playwrights. And because maybe it's atypical again because Konrad and I we've written 7 of the 8 episodes of season 3. So the sort of contract almost when you come into the room is we will write every episode and it is a room. And so I think sometimes that just takes the pressure off people, and they can also we just we're relatively young, I think, and we say at the start of the room we're still relatively inexperienced. We haven't sat and been in rooms for years. We haven't, this is our first thing, and it feels like a very sort of I don't want to say punky, but collegiate kind of quite young atmosphere where everyone has the same level of voice and everyone feels they can say something. And again, it goes back to the point I made earlier about actually being in the room because it's very, very hard. I think there were writers in season 2 that we never even met before. Everything over Zoom. You don't get a feel for someone. You don't get a sense of them. You don't get a sense of their personality. You can't have a drink with them afterwards. All that stuff is super important. And actually bonding with them and making a friendship with them and actually realizing what they want to get from their careers is really important. And all that stuff was just kind of fell by the wayside a little bit when we were doing on Zoom. And in 3, it was we're in constant contact with all the people in our room. And we love to, we follow their careers, and we love to have them back, and love to work with them again. And it's because we created friendships and relationships with them.
I remember in 2020 when we were starting the first season of Silo, the writer's room, and someone else who had already been on a Zoom room said, it works great if you've already worked together before and you know each other. And I said, well, then I'm fucked, because we're just starting this. No, but a lot of the writers, we had worked together before. So, but it got better year by year. So now it's, I don't feel that deficit. Everyone feels that they can speak. I do realize that I'm never muted, that I'm always on, and that everyone else mutes and they put up their hands. They put up the virtual hand and we go in order. But there's also just that reality. Some people are great in the room. Some people are just like pitching engines, and other people not so much, but it's all part of it.
Yeah, I was going to say, in terms of like mentoring people coming up, it's like identifying, when you see talent, identify it and reward it. I had an experience where I had a woman in the room pitching a whole lot, and I asked to talk to her, and she came in my office and she said, you want me to shut up? I'm talking too much. I'm saying too blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, actually, I was going to say, you're a rock star. I want you to run the room when I'm not in the room. You're amazing. But it's like validating the voices so that people actually feel like they can collaborate, validating their scripts, validating their point of view. And, if they're on set and they're covering it, validating their decisions. Because decisions, you can make decisions and it can be wrong, but that's okay. We can fix it the next day. But I think in order to like bring up the next generation, you've got to give the next generation kudos and prop them up to make choices.
I agree 100% with that. I would say for mentoring younger writers, the key thing is time, which you don't always have when you're in the thick of it or whatever. But taking the time to sit down with in the case of a new writer, I had this experience recently, and give them notes. A lot of times you may get something back and go, God, I could do this myself in 10 minutes rather than taking 30 minutes to have a note call. But then that doesn't help the writer. So you have to be willing to invest the time. And then my very insightful wife said, people don't always know what you're thinking. And so I realized that a lot of times I assumed that this particular writer knew. I remember I asked her to redo a scene, and I said, we can't do it. It won't fit the schedule. You need to bring it down. Just, simplify it. And she did, but she had a lot of these, on Ray, on so-and-so. And I said, that's another setup. That doesn't help the schedule. And I realized she had no idea what a setup was. And I was like, that's on me. I need to explain, that's on me a lot on me, not all on me, but it's taking the time to explain and to set expectations and say, this is what I want, or explain, this is why I don't think this act out is working, and give them the opportunity to go back and fix it. But it takes time. And a lot of times you're tired, you've got 80 casting things you've got to look at or whatever. So you just have to have the discipline to say, I'm going to invest my time in you.
I think on that note, I'm also curious about diversity in your rooms and like bringing in a plethora of different voices, and how you when you're building your room, stop yourself and say, like, what voice are we missing, or like what voice we could benefit from here, instead of just going with your like initial, like, this is the easiest route.
I mean, I make it my business to have an inclusive room. I mean, that's what I came up with watching John Wells had inclusive rooms. And so I think when I'm formulating a room, I want different perspectives. And I want people that don't all agree with each other. Sometimes the person that you're like, you heard a little bit of their politics, you hate blah, 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 but they're actually the best person to be in your room because they're part of the scene. So I think it's like reading the samples and making sure that you've got just all these different thinkers, because that's where the room will get juicy.
Yeah.
I think that we are going to start doing a Q&A portion. I'm not sure if they have, oh yes, we have microphone coming this way.
I think as television watchers, we're all used to shows that we like getting canceled, and you have to deal with that. It seems lately, though, there's more shows that are being renewed and then canceled, or maybe taking off of streamers, being disappeared. As showrunners, how do you guys deal with that? How do you feel about that, as that these are your babies that are putting out there and then maybe are no longer accessible? Is that something you're having to come to grips with that maybe you never had to before?
If I'd written anything with industry, I would be scared. But I'm scared the industry would be cancelled, obviously. But we don't have the experience of it. I'm sure it's terrifying thinking that your show will A, be cancelled, and B, will be removed from reality.
Not exist in any kind of media. I think
know.
that's crazy.
I bring up Boomtown. That is not streaming anywhere except you can watch it because people have posted it on YouTube. And it's like, no, we're just a show on YouTube now. Oh, jeez. Oh, God. Okay. But so be it. I mean, that whole idea of things being written off and disappearing, whether it's movies or TV, that's kind of heartbreaking. There's no other way to look at it. One other thing, though, is we're probably all doing shorter length shows, like not doing 10 seasons. We called it quits at 6 for Justified, and they wanted more. But that was a lot of work. By that time, we were pretty tired and afraid of repeating ourselves too much. But so there is this thing where it's, we're not doing, how many did ER do? 18?
Oh, we did 22, 24, 26. It was
episodes, but
episodes.
How many seasons? 18?
No, I think 14 or
14?
something. Yeah.
14 seasons of a big show. It's just
Grey's Anatomy is 20 now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To your question, though, it's an interesting thing. Like OC, for example, this year, there was a question about them being renewed or not, and I think they're going to Peacock, if I'm right. I'm not that showrunner. I'm in the camp, and so I'm familiar with some. I think if you had a choice between your show being canceled or going to a streamer, I would go to streamer. After the third season of Friday Night Lights, there was a new president at NBC, and who did not understand the show or like it. In fact, the quote that went around was, "Who do I have to sleep with to get rid of the show?" And that's not even really what was said. But anyway, but DirecTV stepped up, and we were all like, "DirecTV? What's DirecTV?" It's like, well, they're willing to do 13 episodes, and we were like, "Hooray! We've still got a show." So, it's a double-edged sword. The idea that there's backup platforms for a show, I think is probably a good thing. There's all these save the show campaigns you see about things going around now. Those have worked, right? Does it? Have those worked? Some show got saved. Which one, Hannibal?
Oh, Manifest.
Manifest.
There's been a few.
Hi. I have a question to piggyback off of that. Are you familiar with the process of how a Save the Show campaign works? So once it's canceled, how do we, I'm not in the process of trying to get a show back on, but what does that look like from your side when it does get picked back up because fans want it?
I will say I'm familiar with it just by generally being a member of the public or a fan of a show like you are. That's why I had to ask. Have they worked? Yes. I love it when I see that stuff. I'm like, wow, that is a fan base. These people are passionate about this show. I hope it works.
Awesome.
It's funny. The public has so much to say. They have more influence than they think. It's a very weird time in television. It's a weird time on comments on Instagram, on Twitter. The public, people are listening to the public. So I think if you are passionate about a show that you want to come back, you actually have power to make that happen because they're actually watching all of the social media channels. The streamers and the networks and the buyers.
It's Graham. Graham's the one who's watching.
Graham's watching. They're paying attention to all of the stuff. Yeah.
So my question is kind of for everybody. As a creator who is going out with their first project and pitching themselves as a first-time showrunner, what is some advice that you can give me to sell myself to buyers and as a first-time showrunner? I mean, maybe not me specifically, since you have no idea what I've done or what I'm capable of, but just in general, I guess the question would be, what advice would you give a first-time showrunner who's starting out?
Listen,
Don't gatekeep.
I think if you have an incredible voice and you have something to say, the industry will take notice. I think that is really real. And then you will either be thrust like they were into the show running seat quickly as auteurs with this piece of artwork. But I think another way to go is maybe you partner with a showrunner who helps you get that. And then after season 1 or season 2, they hand the show over to you so that you, if you're responsible with the $100 million or whatever it is, or $50 million.
Thank you.
You know how to allocate it and how to get a show done. I think the most important thing is just to write. Just keep writing. I think if you sell your ideas are coming from around the world. If you're passionate about it, everybody's talking about Baby Reindeer. We all watched it. It's a singular. It's a voice that is amazing. So I think just keep writing, because come to festivals like this, pitch your ideas, meet as many people as you can. If you are like, I'm too tired, I don't want to go to the mixer, because it just takes one person to change it.
I also think me and Mickey really suffered from this. It's like the actual physical pitch of selling something. Like you want to stress all the time how you're not like everybody else, or like how your thing is original, or like, and we had a huge problem of just overcomplicating stuff all the time in an attempt to stand out. So like, and so I think simplicity, so much of this stuff is you'll be in a room with someone, and very likely at the start of your career, you're not in a room with someone who's actually going to make a decision about anything, but they're going to talk to someone who's going to make a decision about something. So what you want to imprint a feeling on them, or a memory of the experience with that person, because they're in 2 hours time, they'll be in the lift with the guy who's going to make the decision. And they'll be like, I had a 9 a.m. meeting with this guy. Oh, what was the show? And if the person who you've said it to isn't like, it's this in a sentence, and then the guy isn't like, wow, that actually sounds kind of cool, then you're kind of a bit fucked. Yeah. So it's almost, and like we were like, when people are like, what's industry about? We would like talk for 15 minutes and they'll be like, well, why would we make that? I mean,
it's about sexy, sad bankers. And I was like, oh, okay, that sounds good.
So, yeah, but then, but like sexy, sad bankers, that's a bit like, and it's a bit like this, and it's a bit like
sexy, sad bankers.
On the back of that, it's a practical thing, which, so forgive me for saying something really obvious, but like, write the pitch down and then read it out.
Yeah. That's great advice.
Because we didn't do that the first time, and there are people in this room who can attest that we talked over each other, we fumbled our words, we were very, very nervous. And
yeah, it can feel really, reading a script to someone when you're in a room with them can feel, for the first like 10 seconds, it's super awkward, obviously, because you're looking down, looking up. But actually, it's so much more distilled and it's so much clearer. And then you instead of umming and ahhing for 10 minutes, you speak for 5 minutes, and they're like, oh, that was great, and you can. So yeah, every pitch we do now, we just do Mickey, Konrad, and we do it like a play, basically.
Thank you so much.
As she's walking, when Joe Weisberg was pitching The Americans, I went on the pitch tour with him, and partly because he was an ex-CIA operative and was very, very precise. No notes, he would do the same pitch word for word every time. 15 minutes, that was it. He was just bang on. And it was like, oh shit. Yeah, you were a spy. You had to prepare. And I do think that memorizing it helps, and just doing it again and again and again.
Hi. You talked about what you do when you look at acting, like self-tapes, but I'm wondering, when you're staffing a show and you're reading samples, are there any like things that stand out to you as like, I need this person, or like, I don't want this person? Like any do's or don'ts for writers who want to submit to shows for you guys?
I think it's the same thing. It's like those first 10 pages have to make you want to read the next 10 pages. And if you actually want to read the next 20 pages, then you're like in it. There's like I don't want to impart any doom and gloom. Just keep writing. If you have a great voice and it pops off the page, eventually someone's going to hire you. They're just going to hire you.
How do you think the writer's room changes coming out of the strike are going to change or alter the way that you set up a show the next couple of years going forward?
We're going to have fewer writers. That's the reality that I've experienced coming out. I mean, they literally said for this next season, you can't have as many as you had before. And that was for the strike shortened season we just did. And I was like, okay, well, now we're back to 22 for this season. I'm going to get nope. And so, I think that's the main thing is that the contraction term that Graham referenced is real, and it sort of takes on a life of its own as it gets repeated by people. It's like, well, it's contraction. We can't afford for you to have all those writers. It's like, well, actually, I disagree. I will say to your point earlier, about diversity, because I'm the same way. I want the most diverse room I can have. And that's diversity in background, experience, race, gender, age, everything. You want to have all the different voices in the room. And NBC and both CBS will actually pay for a diverse writer, a new writer, and I would take full advantage of that. But what was your original question?
Which is, how would it change, and how much more difficult is it going to make your job if you're going to have to do it?
I think if you're trying to get a job, there's going to be fewer jobs, at least in network where I work. And from my standpoint, it's just, and it goes back to what Graham said earlier. Staffing and hiring are one of the biggest decisions you make. And sometimes you're just going on gut. Sometimes it's just, I see somebody just like you said, I'm always looking for voice. Is this person funny? Are they sarcastic? Are they smart? Are they pissed off at the world? Do they, in the case of my show, he's a former military veteran who's seen every, it's like, okay, that counts. So it's passion and voice.
Hey, so y'all talked earlier about mentoring younger writers and how difficult it can be on top of everything else that you're doing to deliver the mentorship that you think that they need to move forward. So what lessons have you learned about staffing a writer's room so that they can get mentorship from other folks in that room when you don't have the bandwidth to do it for them?
There's often some form of hierarchy in the room in terms of senior staff, more mid-level, and then fresher people who are just getting started. And it was something like Justified, where we met in the room, and it was all, there was mentorship in many ways more from, let's say, Fred Golan, who I've worked with since Boomtown, would take some of the other writers under his wing and say, okay, you're doing great, or you don't take so long to answer a question, just speed it up a little bit. And he never did. And he was a brilliant writer. So sometimes there's that. It's tougher, I think, in the Zoom world. And I've found that some of the writers on Silo will just naturally reach out to each other, and they have a lot of side conversations that have nothing to do with me. Or maybe they're all about me and what a jerk I am. But there can be great camaraderie among writers. And that's one of the coolest things, is that sense of, hey, we're all doing this thing, and aren't we lucky? And we're all up here because we love to do what we get to do. If there was someone up here going, it's okay. It's like, well, do something else.
I still drive on the lot, and I'm like, I have butterflies, going to the office of how lucky I am that I get to tell stories for a living. And that feeling, I don't want that feeling to ever go away. And I actually want everybody who wants to write to experience that, to be able to make what they want to make and be on shows, get groomed, and be able to tell stories.
I think that is actually a perfect note to end on. Thank you so much for being here.